Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Through Africa. I am your host, Mercy Bamgola. Today we bring you the top stories from the continent. Kenya and France have signed 11 bilateral agreements to strengthen cooperation in key sectors, including energy, transport, digital infrastructure, climate action, and health. The agreements were signed in Nairobi during French President Emmanuel Macron's official visit to Kenya, where he held talks with Kenyan President William Ruto ahead of the Africa Forward Summit. Among the major deals announced is the modernization of Nairobi's commuter rail system, a project valued at approximately 12.5 billion Kenyan shillings. The project is expected to improve transport links between Nairobi and surrounding towns. The two countries also signed agreements on logistics and port infrastructure development worth around 104 billion Kenyan shillings, alongside partnerships in sustainable aviation fuel production, renewable energy expansion, and digital connectivity. President Ruto said Kenya is seeking to strengthen cooperation with France in areas such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, digital public services, and nuclear energy technology as the country pushes to expand its electricity generation capacity. The agreements also cover the modernization of climate and weather services, blue economy projects, fisheries, agriculture, and healthcare systems, including epidemic preparedness and digital health infrastructure. In addition, Kenya and France agreed to build education and skills development partnerships, particularly in science, technology, and technical training programs. Officials also confirmed progress on a new engineering and science complex at the University of Nairobi. Macron's visit comes as France seeks to expand its partnership across Africa beyond its traditional Francophone allies at a time when geopolitical competition on the continent continues to intensify. More than 30 African leaders and international investors are expected to attend the Africa Forward Summit in Nairobi. Now, Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, is considering Kenya as the location for a new oil refinery that could process up to 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day. According to reports published by the Financial Times, Dangote said he is leaning towards building the refinery in the Kenyan coastal city of Mombasa because of its larger and deeper port infrastructure. The proposed refinery is expected to cost between 15 and 17 billion US dollars and would become one of the largest energy projects in East Africa. Dangote said the final decision now rests with Kenyan President William Ruto, adding that he is ready to proceed depending on the Kenyan government's position. The announcement comes just weeks after President Ruto revealed that East African countries were discussing plans for a joint regional refinery project in Tanzania's port city of Tanga, modeled after Dangote's refinery operations in Nigeria. However, Dangote reportedly argued that Kenya offers a stronger commercial advantage, citing its larger economy and higher fuel consumption than neighboring countries in the region. East Africa currently depends heavily on imported refined petroleum products, mainly from the Middle East. Analysts have said that this leaves the region vulnerable to supply disruptions and rising fuel prices during periods of geopolitical tensions. Dangote's existing refinery in Lagos, Nigeria, began operations in 2024 and has a processing capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. The facility is considered one of the largest single-train refineries in the world and was built at an estimated cost of $20 billion. Speaking previously at an infrastructure summit in Nairobi, Dangote said he would be willing to replicate the Nigerian refinery model in East Africa if governments in the region provide the necessary support and investment environment. If approved, the proposed refinery in Kenya would significantly reshape the region's energy landscape by reducing dependence on imported fuel and strengthen local refining capacity across East Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has condemned recent anti-migrant violence in the country, saying the attacks do not reflect the views of South Africans or government policy. In an open letter released on Monday, Ramaphosa said there is no place in South Africa for xenophobia, intolerance, or violence. He accused what he called opportunists of exploiting public frustrations, especially among poor communities, under the guise of community activism. Some demonstrations targeted undocumented migrants, while others called for foreign nationals to be denied access to public services such as healthcare. One of the latest protests took place in the coastal city of Durban, where several hundred people marched demanding stronger action against migrants without valid documents. Nigeria and Ghana have both expressed alarm over the situation. Nigerian authorities announced plans to repatriate more than 100 of their nationals from South Africa. Abuja also summoned South Africa's envoy and called for investigations into the death of 2 Nigerians in separate incidents involving South African security personnel last month. Ghana summoned South Africa's ambassador over what he described as acts of xenophobia targeted foreign nationals. Despite condemning the violence, Ramaphosa acknowledged growing frustrations over illegal immigration in South Africa. He also said undocumented migration is placing pressure on housing, healthcare, and municipal services, particularly in poorer communities. The president accused some employers of exploiting undocumented migrants by hiring them for lower wages instead of employing South African citizens under legal labor conditions. Ramaphosa stressed that South Africa must address illegal immigration decisively and within the law, while also ensuring that foreign nationals are protected from violence and discrimination. He reiterated that recent attacks and protests against migrants should not be seen as representing the South African population. And in a new development, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he will not resign despite mounting political pressure and a renewed impeachment process linked to the long-running Falafala cash scandal. In a televised national address on Monday, Ramaphosa said stepping down would undermine constitutional processes, insisting that the allegations against him are still being contested through legal channels. He also announced plans to challenge a parliamentary report that found there was evidence suggesting possible misconduct on his part. South Africa's Constitutional Court ruled last week that Parliament acted unlawfully in 2022 when it blocked impeachment proceedings against the president. The court said an earlier independent panel report should have been referred to an impeachment committee for further investigation. At the center of the controversy is the 2020 theft of a large amount of foreign currency from Ramaphosa's Falafala game farm. The money, reportedly more than $580,000, had allegedly been hidden inside furniture on the property. Ramaphosa has maintained that the cash came from the legal sale of buffalo and has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. Opposition parties have intensified calls for the president to resign. The economic freedom fighters welcomed the Constitutional Court's decision and urged Parliament to move ahead with impeachment proceedings immediately. Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance said any legal review by Ramaphosa should not delay parliamentary processes. The president defended his decision to remain in office, saying he has not stolen public funds and has cooperated with investigations into the matter. He argued that resigning now would amount to accepting findings that he believes are flawed. The scandal, often referred to in South Africa as Farmgate or the Falafala affair, has damaged Ramaphosa's anti-corruption image, which helped bring him to power in 2018 after the resignation of former President Jacob Zuma. He had promised to restore trust in government after years of corruption allegations during Zuma's administration. And with that, we have come to the end of today's episode of Through Africa. To send us questions and suggestions on the show as you have watched today, kindly do so on our social media handles as AFROTURK TV. I am your host, Mercy Bamdola, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, stay safe and goodbye.